Hey, this is Stuchiu, and for today's video, I wanted to talk about ENCE at Blast. And in general, I don't think Blast events are that interesting, but I think ENCE beating Astralis here is worth talking about and worth looking into because this is a matchup in my mind. I always thought Astralis should win 8 or 9 times out of 10 just because even though I highly rate ENCE in the world stage, like I think they're top 4, top 5 team, I thought it would be very hard, just stylistically speaking, for them to beat Astralis. And what do I mean by that? If you look at Astralis just strategically, what makes them such a fantastic team? I'd say they're the best tactical team we've ever seen, and that includes like structured setups both on the CT side and T side. They innovated the utility game. They've done they continually expand their playbook and add new setups. And I think you look at their team play. I think for the last year they've been the best 3v3 like small man team in terms of overall team play in a historical sense. I think you have to go to the all-time great teams in order to even compare them. Like we're talking about like SK with Bolts, SK with FNX, or the old Fnatic era team or the old NIP era team, like that level of team play. Then you look at their individual skill, and while I think they've been overrated in terms of individual skill. Like I don't think all of them are fucking monsters. I think they're really each of them is really good within their respective roles. Like I think Zipnix is basically the best support player. I think Device is one of the best operators we've ever seen. Dupree is fairly good. Entry fragger. Magus is a really good anchor and stuff like that, right? But like if I'm looking at it like individually, piece by piece, like I'd say Old Phase was certainly Old Phase when they were at their like peak was certainly man for man a better squad. If I'm looking at Liquid now, I think they're a better squad. If I look at the old Fnatic lineups, I think they had better squads in terms of just raw individual firepower. But here's the thing, that's not exploitable by ENCE because I don't think ENCE have man for man. I don't think ENCE match up to Astralis. You're just talking about raw firepower, and so in order for ENCE to the only way for ENCE to beat Astralis is to fight them basically in their own game, basically in tactics and team play. And just thought strategically that was a very hard thing to do. Now, map pool wise, it was possible. And what I mean by that is if you look at the map pool, what are Astralis' best maps? Astralis' best maps are Inferno and Nuke, right? And then after that, they have a bunch of they don't really play Cash. I don't really know about the Vertigo because I think because Cash is gone, so Vertigo's here. Astralis have kind of lost Overpass, but I think their Dust 2 is still really good, and they can play trade, right? And then you look at ENCE. What are ENCE's best maps? I think ENCE's best maps are Mirage and Trade. I think they're actually pretty good on Overpass as well. So if you just look at the way the map veto for the finals worked out, it kind of worked out exactly how you'd imagine for both teams. Astralis is like get Mirage out, and says get Vertigo out. The Astralis go to Nuke because they should have complete confidence that they should win on Nuke. ENCE pick Train because ENCE realize like the differential, that's the biggest differential between them and Astralis in terms of the map pool. Astralis take out Overpass because ENCE is a pretty good Overpass team, and Astralis are notably weak on it. ENCE take out Inferno because Astralis' best map is, I personally think their best map is Inferno. If you're just talking about the fact that everybody plays Inferno, so you have to be better on that map relative to Nuke to like keep a hold of that map. And then Dust 2 was left over, right? But when I looked at it, there are a few factors that you have to consider going into this matchup as to why I think ENCE beat Astralis. And the first one you have to consider is ring rust for Astralis. And what I mean by that is they've only played Blast events since the major ended, right? And Blast events are only 5 best of ones and a best of 3 finals. And it's not like Astralis made it to all 3 finals, right? So essentially, Astralis have, if you're talking about live LAN events, they've only played like a few of them. They played like some best of 3s in the group stage, some best of ones, and then the finals against Liquid at Sao Paulo. In Miami, they basically only played the 5 best of ones, and then in Madrid they've played these 5 best of ones and then best of 3 finals. Now you look at the old last year when they went to these big events. If you actually looked at the progression of Astralis through these events, it was often the case that they'd start off slow, as in like the group stage, they're okay, and then they slowly ramped up over time. But those events lasted a week, and not only that, but those events had like actually 3 to 4 times as many games in general compared to a blast event. So Astralis really don't have the time to ramp up their individual skill. And this has always been one of their problems, I guess, if you're talking about like a short event like Blast, because you don't really get the time to ramp up. It's only a 2-day event, only 5 best of ones and a best of 3 finals. And if you're talking about how this affected Astralis in the server, I'd say the biggest knock-on effect for Astralis was Dupree wasn't here. And I think Dupree is like a pretty critical player if you're just talking about space creation and winning early game duels for Astralis. I think the other player you can look at if Dupree isn't making it work as Glaive, but I don't think Glaive's necessarily had a good event either. So, and then if those two don't go up in terms of getting like the early aggressive duels or getting the opening picks, then you have to revert to Zipnix more or Magus more. And I think in general, if you look at the way this event played out, I think Device and Magus both had pretty good events. Not like their prime, not their prime power events, like their peak level events. And Zipnix just had like, he didn't have a great event, but it's like, I actually don't think they can assume Zipnix will always go off and get like 8 or 9 clutches a tournament. I think that's ridiculous to assume. I think that's just like they've leaned on it a lot, but like I don't think you can assume that's a consistent win factor in my opinion. And this becomes a huge so basically the fact that Dupree and Glaive fall off becomes a huge factor where all of a sudden individual skill can come into effect for ENCE as a strategic win factor. And the biggest one here for ENCE is Aerial. So basically Aerial goes ham. And what's great about Aerial is that he is the exact matchup you want for ENCE if you know Dupree or Glaive are not on fire or having a bad event. Because Aerial is the most likely one to be fighting in the like early vanguard like sort of position. Like he's the first guy in. He's going to be getting those aggressive duels. He's going to be doing those aggressive pushes. And if your riflers on the other side aren't able to meet him head to head, then more likely than not, ENCE is going to get into like power play situations of 5v4 or maybe even 5v3. And this is basically what happened if you're just talking about a raw individual strategic point of view. So in that sense, a win condition that I didn't think could exist came into being because Aerial was on point and then Dupree and Glaive had a bad event. Now, there is something weird to be said, not weird, but like there is something to be said about Dupree and Glaive in general. I think both of them have been falling off in 2019. And part of it might be the ring rust factor I talked about earlier, but I think another part of it is I think it's the inclusion of the AUG meta. And the reason I say that is because I think both Dupree and Glaive have yet to really adjust to the AUG angles on the T side, and both of them are getting kind of slaughtered by ENCE, who have completely I think ENCE are straight up the best AUG team in my view. I think all of their players really know what angles to use and how to play with it. So when you go to the CT side, for instance, like I'm not going to talk too much about this too, but it's worth noting if you look at like there's a round on the CT side where ENCE played against Astralis, and the setup they used was like they had two and B, they had Alu in mid looking for a pick, and then two players at long, right? And Alu gets an early pick. then ENCE revert to a typical default 3 at A, 2 at B. But here's what's funny about ENCE in this particular scenario is they set up their crossfire to be as long as fucking possible. So they have one guy way out in pit. They have Alu a car with his op, and they have one guy a goose with his og. And so basically, when Astralis eventually hit the site, like even though they win out the initial aim duels, they have to do it by hitting headshots. And so they headshot the guy in pit. They headshot the guy Alu at car, but they also they can't do it just twice. They have to do it 3 times because basically this gives information and positioning to, I think it was Alexi B at Goose, who just uses AUG and then wins the and wins the duels because he has the scope, he has better range than the AK players, and then that just ends kind of Astralis' chances of winning that round. And this is what's the word I'm looking for? This is sort of symbolic of what's happening with Dupree and Glaive in general, just versus these AUG heavy CT setups. And I think they're going to have to go back to the drawing board because I think it's going. I don't know if it's like an individual problem, but there might be a tactical solution for them. They just have to work on it and kind of figure out exactly what ENCE are doing. Because I think if you figure out how ENCE are playing AUGs, then you could I think that will just like trickle down to the rest of the teams because I think they're the best AUG team. Now, even though I've pointed out like basically win condition shows up in this finals for ENCE with Aerial in terms of firepower, I also think straight up just tactically and in terms of team play, ENCE outplay Astralis here, and so basically the 2 win factors I thought for certain could go and should have gone in Astralis' favor actually go in ENCE's favor in this finals, and so it's worth going over exactly how this works out. So when I think about ENCE, when I think about ENCE's tactics, because I think tactics are such a broad term, it's really hard to define what anybody really means by that, whether that's like, oh, they have like really cool executes, or whether that's they have a really structured system with the structured roles and great rotations, or do you mean like they have a really structured 3v3 scenarios or whatnot, or aggression or whatever. I think when I look at ENCE, I think here are their unique aspects when you're looking at them as a tactical and strategic, tactically structured team. First, I think they have really good fast, aggressive executes, and this is important to note because in terms of long game, I think they're one of the best at using their fast play executes to set up long Kong T sides. I guess that's what I'll call it. Second thing I want to point out is they often use their structured utility to put like 1 or 2 players in like a very aggressive space to either go for an aim duel or to like lock down or to lock down a position. Third thing you want to look out for is I think they have very structured CT side setups for reaggressing into the same area. And what I mean by that is in like a 5v5 situation, like for instance, like Dust 2. Here's one of the tricks they sometimes use in order to hold like short on Dust 2 on the CT side is they have Alu play like the cat drop position, right? And then he takes the shot and falls off. Well, after he does that though, he throws a molly up there so that it stalls out the other team, and other team has to either waste a smoke to push through, which they won't do, or they have to wait it out. And then their player at Goose will throw another molly, and then that will give Alu enough time to go all the way there, and then they'll flash Alu back in, and then he's allowed to take another shot before he can fall off again. And they do the same thing against Astralis. a lot of they do the same thing against Astralis in terms of the CT side positioning. Like if you're looking at Nuke, if they in one of the rounds basically, uh, what's his name? Ariel plays very aggressively towards red and yard, right? And he's out there, he's looking up towards silo, and after showing presence, like I think he tried to take a few shots, he runs back, and then when Astralis reaggress onto yard, then Alu comes from secret and takes like pot shots at them with his op, and they don't see that coming in terms of focus, they're more focused on Ariel being an outside presence than they are on secret, and that's kind of how ENCE play their CT side, at least 5v5s. The last thing you want to know about ENCE in terms of it as a tactical team is they have really good three-man setups in like small man scenarios, and I'll go back into that later when we dive more into the details of the game. But basically, in terms of 3v3, usually that should almost always go to Astralis, but in this particular finals, more of the 3v3s go to ENCE. And then you look at the tactics, I actually think Glaive did a pretty good job overall. I just think Alexi B slightly outdid him. And then you add in the fact with Ariel smashing Dupree and Glaive as like an aggressive rifler, and you have the recipe for how ENCE beat Astralis here. So first map is Nuke, right? And let's see here. Nuke, they start on, let me check real quick. So Nuke and start on the CT side. Now, let's talk about this. All right, let's talk about the basic structure of how ENCE kind of take momentum. And momentum is such a, I want to call it almost a fraudulent term, but it's not really. Like it's basically just a shorthand for like a very long, complicated tactical or player oriented sort of pattern that somebody is seeing, but they don't really have time to break down exactly what the fuck is going on because it's pretty complicated. So they just go with momentum. So what I mean by momentum here is positioning is basically tempo, I guess, is the best way to put it. So if you look at the way this game works out, ENCE in their first rifle round is, I think, the 6th round. Astralis, I think, are probably going to try to play a default, but what ENCE do is they do, for the first gambit, they do a super aggressive crunch on lobby. 2 guys from ramp room, 1 guy from hut, 2 guys from squeak, and then they basically slaughter Astralis before Astralis gets anything on the ground, and they win the round. And that sets the tempo for most of the rest of the half. Because by doing this, they all of a sudden, Astralis are like, okay, they're being very aggressive. Let's play a bit more passive. If we take the right duels, if they do that shit again, we'll win. But by doing this from ENCE's point of view, or Lexi B's point of view, I'm not exactly sure who's calling on that side. But by doing this on the CT side, you've essentially created a bunch of time and space in your subsequent rounds. Because now Astralis have to respect the fact that you are willing to do that as your opener. And the problem for Astralis is they gave too much, I think they gave too much respect towards the fact that ENCE would do this. And because they gave too much respect, they gave Ariel way too much space, because Ariel was on point in this match. And by starting with this lobby crunch, they basically gave Ariel a bunch of space and yard to be very aggressive and get that information. So you look at like the 8th round, which is the next rifle round. And basically the whole point of this round is, from a tactical point of view, is Astralis throw the yard smokes, right? And then from that point on, like the natural reaction of the CT side is, oh, we need to move a player from upper to lower through vents. generally speaking, assuming they don't already have a player in secret. And by doing that, Astralis can then execute on the upper, and then they'll be in a better like power play position because one of the defenders is missing. The problem with this thought though is because they gave ENCE too much space. Ariel was just straight up past the smokes and knew nobody was there, and because he knew nobody was there, like it didn't really matter, right? And even though Astralis win this round, it was strategically and tactically of a superior round from ENCE. And so basically this is basically the essential holding pattern for the rest of this half as to why Astralis can't get anything done, because Ariel and Alu are controlling Yard, and Astralis don't have the firepower to deal with it, and they don't have like they tried a bunch of like other tactical things to try to get past it. Like they tried like throwing an AXQ and then sneaking Zitnix into vent, or they tried a few other things, but like none of it was really sticking. And so it was really just hard for one of the reasons I think they were losing yard control a lot is because like they're just running to Augs, or like sometimes they're just super messy. Like they'd miss a smoke, and then I think Ariel would be like, oh, I could just pick straight down and get 2 kills with my Aug. Like I think basically like for Astralis they were just messy on that first half. And then you go to the T side. I think the T side is less interesting, but it's worth noting a few things. Like first, Alexi B used like the same tactic that Galev used on him. So like you basically use the yard nades to force a rotate, and then you hit upper. I think that's like a pretty smart tactical decision, just in that within the realms of that round. But basically, like ENCE smashed Astralis so hard on the CT side that they only had to grind a few rounds on the T side to win the game. Now you go to the second map, Train, and I think in terms of like basically the same problem that happened on Nuke happens on Train, in the sense that Ariel's getting way too much information. He's winning way too many duels, and that's like a huge win factor. But like we're gonna go into the other stuff because I think you could just look at the game and you realize fucking Ariel was godly in that series. But I want to look at the small details that allowed ENCE to at least tactically outplay Astralis on this particular map. So you look at the T side, right? Basically, ENCE start off with a very aggressive opener where they use the yard nades and then try to instantly take pop and like have a guy at Olaf or have a guy like lurk out a T main and try to aggressively look for those duels, right? And then what's interesting is like, okay, so I earlier talked about the 3v3 scenario, and if you look at the round 6 in this particular scenario, ENCE like go for what's my all right. So back up. So basically, there are a few things that's going on here, because there's a lot of. All right, I'll restart. Basically, Alexi B starts off by setting up a very long gambit, and within that gambit, there's another gambit. So first, we're going to talk about the long gambit. So basically, Alexi B starts off with very aggressive openers, right? And they're not really catching. Like, I think in terms of space, it's working out well, but in terms of individual duels, like basically once they push in, like Astralis have been stopping them. And then you got to round 6. In round 6, ENCE revert to like a 4B, 4-1 tactic, where basically they have X7 as the lurk, and then 4 players take B halls, and then they hit they hit the B site, right? And this is basically a round where ENCE 3v3 is what beats Astralis's defense. What I mean by that is once they hit the B site, Device gets 2 kills. And generally speaking, when Device gets the opening 2 kills with his op, that should be done. It should be game over for that round. But here's what happens. ENCE is still able to clear Zipnix. They're able to put the bomb plant down. And X7, basically, he does a very aggressive lurk that forces Magisk and Dupree to focus on him. And he buys a shit ton of time because he's coming out from Team Main, and he basically just hides an Olaf. So both of them have to clear clear X7 out before they can go on the retake. In the meantime, ENCE have already killed Zipnix, they've already killed Glaive, and with all the time those other 2 players are Dupree and Magisk are trying to clear out X7, this creates a huge amount of space for the remaining ENCE players to go towards Device because they know where he is because he opted them earlier in the round to close the space and kill Device. And then by the time, so even though X7 basically gets no kills here, he has created so much space. He has ensured that he is like one of the primary reasons as to why ENCE win this round, because by the time they get to the those 2 players from Astralis try to get to the B site, ENCE are just left in a super favorable post-plant position because they could be anywhere at that point. Now, we've seen a few gambit. We basically, from Astralis' point of view, you've seen a very aggressive A control. You've seen a B hit, and so in their view, Astralis want to take control of the game. And one of the favorite ways of doing that is taking Pop Dog early with 2 players. And in their minds, they're thinking, well, it should be safe because ENCE have generally just rushed it. They've never like truly cleared it out with like a molly and a flash and whatnot. But basically, this was all just a gambit by a Alexi B, because in this particular round, the Astralis go for this 2 pop control, and Alexi B calls for the clear. So Sergey throws the molly down. Somebody throws a flash over, and so the molly forces them out. The flash blinds them, and another player comes out and kills them. And the reason I think, like, you could say, for instance, like, oh, that they just happened to run it this round, but I think if you look at the Na'Vi game, if you look at the ENCE, if you look at the Astralis game in the group stages, and you look at this particular finals, there are just way too many repeats of this pattern from ENCE for me to think it's been like luck or like he just happened to get into it. I think these are like clear designs in his tactical game, and and in this particular case, it kind of like smashes Astralis, or like not smash, but like it catches Astralis off guard. Even so, I think there is something to be said about like the economy and how weird it is, in that it, because Astralis like did so well in the early like rounds, it kind of just backfired on them pretty hard. But I mean, that's just the world we live in now, so whatever. Let's go on to the second half. And actually, was there something else I wanted to talk about here? Let me think. No, I think we're good. So you go to the city side of ENCE's train, right? All right. Let me think what exactly I want to talk about. Okay, so I want to talk a bit about their CT side setups. I think this will be the last thing I'll talk about, just because it's a unique sort of feature of ENCE's play. So basically, they have this pretty interesting sort of setup on the CT side of train, where basically Ariel is All right, so the way the CT side half worked out is basically Ariel kept taking Olaf, and Astralis in the beginning just got caught off guard. Like they try like if you look at the first round they did it, basically they do a jump bait shot for an op, but it wasn't an op there. It was just a player with a rifle, and Ariel didn't kill that first guy because he was blind, but eventually the blind wore out and he killed the second guy, and that got enough space for like enough space and time for ENCE to rotate over to get their Aug's position and then kill the hit. Next time they do it, they clear it out. But I think, but then the third time they do it, I think like what happens is they no longer have any of the nades to really beat out to counter strat that area, right? And so basically this becomes like a very long game between Astralis and Ariel Astralis and Ariel, because Ariel is popping off and they need to find a way to stop him. And eventually what happens is I think Ariel and Alexi B kind of just outsmart Astralis in terms of countering their counter, right? So you look at round 22, and they've from Astralis' point of view, they've kind of realized they need to take out Ariel first before they can get anything else done on the map. So they clear out team main, and the way to do is like they flash the typical Olaf position that Ariel was playing. Ariel isn't there, right? And so because Ariel isn't there, the next assumption is maybe he is in Pop Dog because that's his other like preferred spot. So they molly Pop, and they flash over. Basically the same setup I talked about earlier with ENCE. But here's the difference, and here's why I think just in terms of tactics, like here's like another reason I guess in terms of tactics, ENCE outplayed Astralis here, is Ariel individually he plays anti-flash for that particular pop flash. At the same time, Alexi B the entire time was like holding an angle for that, and when the molly came out, he takes out his own molly and he mollies team main. And by doing this in response to the flash, it allows Ariel to get in a fair 1v1 duel, or even like technically a favorable 1v1 duel because he's not blind and the other guy is running, and then he just kills the other guy, and that puts ENCE up in the power the power play situation on their CT side, and that's just like something unique I guess about ENCE is they're countering the general meta. And you also see, and this is like an aside, but you also see this kind of in their Navi game as well, where they use a very similar kind of setup, even though it was on Mirage. So just summarizing my points, basically, when you look at the way ENCE beat Astralis here, they happen to have a win condition that I don't not normally think exists. Like I don't think Dupree and Glaive are that off their game. I also don't know if Ariel will always be this godlike. After all, this is like a small event with a limited amount of games, but it happened here. So that's a win condition they had in their arsenal. That in itself enabled a lot of their CT side setups and made their tactics look better. I think in general though, their like tactics in the 3v3 were already outplaying Astralis. Then you look at their map pool. I think the fact that ENCE have a pretty good map pool, they play Overpass, they play Mirage, they play Train. These are all maps that Astralis don't necessarily like as much or as godly on as like Inferno and Nuke. And then because of all these combinations coming together, ENCE were able to beat Astralis at Blast. So that about sums it up. I think going forward, what you want to look at for ENCE at least is whether or not Ariel is really this good. I don't think he is. Like I what I mean by that is like I don't think it's sustainable to play at this level for a long period of time. Like the last guy I think that did it as a rifler was Fur. I think he's the only guy I've really seen play this kind of like really aggressive CT side like Vanguard style was Fur. So even so, like if in general, I think the rest of the stuff is pretty repeatable though, like the 3v3s, the tactics, the team play, and because of that, I think I didn't really go over it, but like basically, ENCE have a shit ton of really interesting CT side setups, and because of that, they almost never have to like double dip their defense, so it makes them very hard to read, at least on the rifle rounds, and also on their and I also didn't go into this, but their force by rounds are actually surprisingly good, or their save rounds are surprisingly good. Like they have a lot of good ideas of how they want to play it out as well, and so because of that, I just think ENCE, even though I don't think ENCE are like second best team in the world, I think that's kind of like a ridiculous claim. I think they're a top four team, and I think they potentially have the tools to be a very dangerous dark horse against some of the best teams in the world. Like I think you run them against a team like Navi or Liquid. I think they might. I think they have a pretty close to like a 50-50 shot against those teams. So I definitely like to see them going forward. And if they can get like, here's the thing: if Ariel does become as godly as he was in this finals as like a consistent thing, I think they could become like a number 2 team in the world or whatever, because their tactics and team play is already as good as is already better than I think most of the other teams out there. All right, that's about it. See you guys later.